Hello, and welcome to the Retirement Point Podcast, Season 1, Episode 4. My name is Catherine Harbour, and I'll be your host today. Today with us, we have Mr. Don Bernardo. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So I read just a little bit about your background, Mr. Bernardo, and I noticed that, of course, you went to Brown and you majored in American literature, and so curious to know how you went from majoring in American literature to estate planning for high net worth individuals. Just tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, I went to law school at Buffalo University after Brown, and at in law school, I particularly liked the estate planning work courses, but did not want to live in a big city, so I moved into the estate planning work in a bank trust department in Buffalo, where I lived twice. You really have to be stupid to live in Buffalo twice, but
Oh, no.
twice. And eventually ended up. I was in several other trust departments, but eventually ended up establishing one at the largest credit union in the country. No other credit union had a trust department at the time, and the way I structured it, they now have about 17 affiliated credit unions that have trust operations. I specialized in estate planning for high net worth individuals. I've lectured all over the country on the subject. I have written about 20 topical pieces or white papers called Hot Topics in Estate Planning. And I'm a specialist in one particular area called living trusts, where I have established estate plans for very famous people like Celine Dion and the Buffalo Bills that went to the Super Bowl 4 times in a row and lost 4 times in a row. Um, and so that was kind of the transition.
Wow.
I clerked for um, the chief judge of the New York Court of Appeals, which is the highest judgeship in New York. And he's the guy who told me, look, if you want to go to a law school, you should get a very firm foundation in writing skills, because
Hmm.
you'll end up having to write briefs and so on. So
Mm.
that's how I got to Brown. And then I told you the story about how I got to from Brown into estate planning.
Right. Okay. Okay. And I guess I don't know enough about Buffalo for someone to say living there twice was probably not the best decision. So what is that? What does that mean for
It
those of us
means
who aren't from New York?
200 inches of snow a year.
Wow.
And just incredible amounts of snow, to the point where sometimes you'll see a picture of a car that looks like a lump in the snow. Well, in 76, when I lived there the second time, my house looked like a lump,
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
and you couldn't open the front door. It took us about a week to dig out of the driveway. That's how bad it was. On the thruway, they were helicopter lifting people off of their car sites because they were running out of gas. I mean, it was a 100-year blizzard is what it was. So
What? Wow.
you got to be a masochist to live there 2 times.
So you don't miss the snow in North Carolina, do you? Not at all, right. Well, that sounds like such an interesting career. What is and especially writing papers and lecturing and um, educating people about really doing the right thing for their families, right?
Correct.
So What now, when you were lecturing and you wrote papers, were those all geared towards high net worth individuals, or did you have any sort of interaction, I guess, with the rest of us?
No, the estate planning. I mean, it wasn't just high net worth
Okay.
individuals.
Okay.
I dealt with all just you type people,
Right.
um, but no, the estate planning work that I did for the high net worth people um, was the 20 hot topics that I wrote the white papers about were all within the subject matter, the general subject matter of estate planning,
Mm-hmm.
and various different topics about estate planning, specialized topics, including that one that I mentioned, the living trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so uh, they, the high net worth people, for example, Jim Kelly of the Buffalo Bills, who was the quarterback that took them to the 4 Super Bowls. He had a net worth of about $20 million and growing, and so I saved him about $5 million in estate taxes, and that's money that went to the family instead of going to the government, who
Right.
spends it wisely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you were to, let's, for the listeners out there, give one or two pieces of advice, for people who were embarking on this estate planning or thinking about it, what would you want to leave them with?
Well, most people will go to an attorney when they think about estate planning, and
Mm-hmm.
the attorney will encourage them to have a will uh, to transfer assets at death. But that's probably the worst way to do it, and the attorney has some enlightened self-interest in recommending a will, because if you die with a will, the will has to go through probate, and probate isn't a very expensive and time-consuming process, and the attorney at $250 an hour or whatever he or she charges um, uh, would prefer to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
My recommendation is to use this vehicle called a living trust that you transfer all your assets to during your lifetime, just retitle them. For example, a brokerage account that may be titled in your name, maybe and your wife's name, you just retitle into the name of this joint revocable living trust.
Hmm.
You have as much control of the assets during your lifetime, but you typically would hire a bank trust department to manage those investments. And you can say yes or no to whatever the trust department proposes. Um, and you don't even have to use a trust department. You can be the trustee of the trust yourself.
Hmm.
So you have as much control over the investments as you would have if they were titled in your own name. But the advantage is that if later in life um, you're no longer able to manage the assets, the trustee can do that. If you have named yourself as trustee, you'd be naming a successor trustee who may be either your wife or a child,
Mm-hmm.
and they can manage the assets. And by that, I mean manage the investments, and if it becomes necessary, pay your bills and all of that kind of thing. And then at your death, the trust continues for the surviving spouse if she's living. If not, then it gets distributed to the kids. No probate.
Right. Okay.
It's probably, in Jim Kelly's case, it probably saved him um, just in probate fees about 5% of his $20 million.
Mm.
That saved him a lot of money,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
$1 million, and I mean, yeah, $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And
$1 million. Yeah.
then, in addition, and in his case, and it's going to change under Biden, I believe, back to where it used to be. There's something called a marital deduction for $1 million at that time. And that means that you could set up a trust that was for the first spouse, and all of the other assets would not be taxed. And then at the death of the second spouse, they would be taxed. Now the exemption is $10 million, so most people don't have to
Oh,
worry about tax, but I think it's going to go back to a million.
oh,
Uh,
wow. Okay.
the federal tax is 55%, and the state tax is 16% in
Oh my
North Carolina.
gosh.
So, here you've worked all your
Wow.
life, you paid income taxes. When you made it, you paid sales taxes. When you bought something,
Mm-hmm.
they'll get it from you that way. They'll get it from you when you die, unless you
Wow.
do planning.
Right. Okay. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is it doesn't, I mean, I think for me, the impression has always been, gee, you do a trust if you are wealthy, right? But it sounds to me like what you're saying is it's really a vehicle that's available to anyone.
That's correct, and
Yeah. Hmm.
that's what I recommend. And then some of those hot topics papers go into much more extensive uh, review of, for example, how the estate tax savings works,
Hmm.
uh, and how the trustee can manage the investments and pay your bills for you if it becomes necessary, if
Okay.
you're no longer able to manage your own affairs. Uh, it also takes a big burden off the surviving spouse who may not be all that familiar with
Hmm.
even balancing a checkbook, let alone managing investments.
Sure.
It's a good device.
So where can listeners find, is there a place where listeners can find your papers on hot topics?
No, there's not.
Okay.
They can email me and I'll be happy to share them.
Okay.
Uh, but the and the email address is on the website that I'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay.
Uh, but the um, typically I would use them and distribute those that applied to a particular individual and
Mm,
not them because they're very, I mean, this is not like reading a novel. This is pretty technical stuff.
mm-hmm. Okay. Makes sense. So, so fast forwarding a little bit, so that it sounds like a very, gosh, rewarding career, right? Helping people with that, and it sounds like you've helped a lot of individuals over your career. How did you know when it was time to think about retiring?
Well, actually, it's interesting. I went on to a second career for a brief period of time. Owned a company that drilled and operated natural gas wells for about 5 years.
Wow. Okay.
And natural gas prices cratered. And so I went back to the trust business. This was my second tour in Buffalo and decided that with the weather and everything, I needed to move south. So I moved to the Outer Banks of North Carolina and have enjoyed the weather ever since. I had gone there many times, but I did a little bit of research and I found that I lived in Florida for a while, and the heat down there, it's averages, the temperature is 80 degrees. Up north where I lived, it was 40 degrees, and in the Outer Banks, it was 60. So I settled on the median.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So when you first moved to Roanoke Island, you continued working in estate planning, or is that when
Well,
you retired?
my wife had Alzheimer's, and so I had a lot of time on my hands, and I set up something called the Estate Planning Council, uh, the Estate Planning Center of the Outer Banks. And I advised people there on how to use this living trust. In that case, there are some oceanfront properties that are 25, $30 million in value. So just those oceanfront properties retitled into the name of the trust created a lot of savings. And these folks that had $25 million properties had tons of other assets. So it worked quite well while I was working on another project.
Sure. Okay. Well, was the other project your book?
It was,
It was. Okay. And tell us a little bit about that. So backing up, so getting a degree in American literature, did your desire to write a book start way back when, or at some other point during your life?
I started way back when, but I was never able to apply the degree directly to what I enjoyed doing, which was writing, and certainly not to fiction. And this is a fiction novel. It's a historic novel, but it's fiction. Um, and it was inspired by a play that has been running on the Outer Banks for um, uh,
Over 80
87,
years. Yeah.
87 years,
Hmm.
and about 4.5 million people have seen the play. And it's all about Queen Elizabeth's effort to establish the first English colony in America. But it ends, the historical part of the story ends with the colonists being chased out of Roanoke. And I lived about a mile away from
Mm.
the site where this all happened and where the play is performed. And To parts unknown. Well, that's what my novel does. It solves that oldest American mystery, and it's a fun book. It ends with a love story about Virginia Dare, who was the daughter of the grandfather who uh, was one of the colonists who were lost.
Mm-hmm.
The story basically runs that 117 colonists were sent here. Within 3 years, they all disappeared without a trace. And so my book explains that. And I've got some notes. I don't know if you want to get into any of the detail, but it's a fun story.
Well, I certainly don't want to spoil it for listeners because I do want them to be able to order your book, and
Yep.
I would certainly like to do so. Um, I didn't have enough time to do that before we talked today, but I would definitely, and I want to visit Roanoke Island after hearing about it and the play, and it just seems beautiful and interesting, and all of the above.
It is it's a beautiful place. It's about a mile and a half from the Nags Head beaches, and the play is absolutely amazing. It's an outdoor amphitheater that seats 2,000 people under the stars at 8 p.m. for 84 nights in the summer. It plays with 80 professional actors and 40 stage folks, and it's on the largest stage outside of New York City, this
Wow.
outdoor amphitheater.
Hmm.
Um, and it's part musical, symphonic musical, and part play. The costumes are breathtaking, particularly those that relate to Queen Elizabeth. Um, and Let me talk just a little bit about the play.
Sure.
The book, follows a big part of the play.
Hmm.
Um, there was a plague, believe it or not, in London that had a 75% mortality rate. Now, does that sound vaguely familiar?
Hmm.
Um, but the Spanish were also attacking all of the English ships,
Hmm.
the mercantile ships. And so she decided that literally to save enough English um, people, the thing had gone on for 6 years, to save enough English people and also to establish military bases in the New World, she would set up 7 colonies, and Roanoke was the first. Um, but as the play indicates, the colonists came over, um, built a bunch of buildings and a fort. Um, there were 2 Indians. One was a good Indian by the name of Manteo, and there is a city on Roanoke Island called Manteo. Um, and he helped the colonists. There was a bad Indian called Wanchese, and there's a town there as well named after him. And he ironically, correctly, was concerned that the English would take over the country. And so he fought and tried and vowed to kill all of them. And uh, when his siege started a famine in the colony, the captain left to go back to England to provision up. He had to stay there because of the Spanish War for 3 years. The Queen needed his ship, and they beat the Spanish Armada and was then allowed to come back to this country. When he got here, the colonists were all gone.
Right.
It's at the time that they depart, which is about 6 months after they got there, um, Manio saved them, took them to Hatteras, where the famous lighthouse is, and that was his home village. And then the colonists integrated into the society. There were only 22 of them left. And then there's a love story about how Virginia Dare, by the time she reached 18, falls in love with Mantio's son. The medicine man falls in love with her as well. He puts a spell on her, turns her into a snow white doe.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the story is about Mantio's efforts to restore her to her human form. And I'll leave it at that because that's where a lot of the fun comes in.
Oh, okay. Wow. So what you've shared already sounds fun. So there's a lot more. Okay. So tell listeners then where in that story that you just told, where does your the fiction start as far as we know, right?
Well,
So when I know in 1590, right? Wasn't it 1590 that the gentleman returned and they were gone,
that's
right?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it starts. There's I would say it's about 80% historical fact, and I did a lot of research on this, and about 20% fiction. And it starts with a fiction of a University of North Carolina professor who is the eighth generation of the ship's carpenter on the ship that came over from London.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and his exploits in London before he came, um, that were driven by the fact that his father had a love affair with the Queen's number one handmaiden, and they were both killed, and he was expelled from court. And all of the efforts that he had to make to try to get to America, Sir Walter Raleigh commissioned a ship, and he came over on that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's all fiction.
Okay.
But then we pick up with the fact, and the fact is essentially the same as the story of the play. And then we go back to fiction.
Mm. Okay.
Manio rescues the colonists, and eventually um, the love story with Virginia
Okay.
Dare, who was the granddaughter of the captain who had to go back.
Right. So Mantio rescuing the remaining colonists, that part is and
Fiction.
takes them to Hatteras. Okay, that's fiction. Okay.
And it solves that the oldest American mystery. It is the oldest American,
Right.
and the play has was written by a UNC professor and has run for 87 years to audiences of 4.5 million people. And I joke in the promotional material, can you imagine a Broadway producer who wouldn't give up a firstborn for a play that ran for 87
Right.
years and played to 4.5 million people?
Right. Yeah. It's astonishing. I mean, really, that's amazing. I look forward to seeing it. Didn't even know it existed. I'm glad to know now,
Here's
and it's
a
because I get to talk to you today. Oh, okay. That's your book.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. The Legend of the Snow White Doe. Okay. And you're going to tell, do you want to tell us, why don't you tell us now how we can order your book?
Well, you can go to the website, which is the best way not only to find out more information about the book, But it can be ordered at the 22 retailers on the Outer Banks if you happen to be going there, who have sold 4,000 copies already.
Fantastic.
Pretty good start. But you can also order it online by going to a website that's called The Lost Colonists Found.com.
Okay.
And S is important, The Lost
Right.
Colonists Found.com.
Okay. The Lost Colonists with an S on the end. Found.com. The Lost Colonists Found.com.
And
Okay.
the book is only, it's a quick read. It's about an hour and a half read. I designed it for beachgoers who wanted to read it on the beach or at night or on a rainy day. Um, and uh, Interestingly, one of the readers, one of the places that it sold very well was at some of the smaller hotels who purchased it to give to as complimentary gift to their guests.
Mhm.
And one of the folks who read it was Ron Howard. And he was in a wine shop that I go to quite often, visiting Andy Griffith's widow. That's where Andy lived.
Hmm.
And he got his start in the play, by the way. For the first 7 years, he played Sir Walter Raleigh. But he and his wife go there every 2 or 3 years to visit with her. And they came into a wine shop that was carrying the book, and sat down to have a glass of wine. I was there. I was going to say something to him, but I didn't want to bother him because I knew he was on vacation. But the next morning, I went to resupply one of the bed and breakfasts, and it turns out that he was staying there, and they came down the stairs, and she is holding my book.
Oh, wow.
At that point, I couldn't resist, so I went
Right.
over and I said, Mr. Howard, I wrote that. I said, and I'm sure every author believes that his book is a movie, but I think this one really is.
Mhm.
And his wife interrupted. She said, Ron, I read the whole book last night, and I think it's a movie.
Wow.
Well, I about fell over, exchanged business cards with him. I have his framed. I don't think mine is framed on his. Uh, he uh, wrote the name of a producer that he wanted me to work with, and we've been working on and off for about a year. And I get the impression that
Hmm.
this guy is one of these guys who doesn't like to be told from the top down what to do. He
Hmm.
wants it to be his idea, but you never know. I tell everybody that I talk to, particularly the women, to buy your ball gown for the Oscars now.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation will drive the costs up by the time it wins the Oscar.
Well, I mean, you've only been having the conversation with a year with him, right? I mean, I think that things move a lot more slowly and take a long time in Hollywood, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a movie. I will be on the lookout, as will the
Yeah,
listeners, I'm sure.
yeah. Read the book, and I think you'll
Hmm.
see why it's a movie. It's only about 4 or 5 sets, and then it's, this business of solving the oldest American
Hmm.
mystery,
Hmm.
I think is the hook.
Yeah, agreed. So, how long did it take you to write the book?
4 years.
4 years. Okay.
It
Sounds
was
like
a
you might have been taking care of your wife at the same time. Okay.
was, and I got to the business. I self-published the book, and I got into that business shortly after she passed,
Hmm.
and that was a 1 year process. You have no idea. I mean, now I have a great respect for why people use publishers. Um, I am writing a children's book about it.
So, how far along are you in the process of writing your children's book?
Children's book is almost finished. I just have to put a few touches on it. It's not easy to reduce. See, the thing about this book is that, for example, the Dare County School District, which, Dare County is Virginia Dare,
Mm-hmm.
Big
Mm-hmm.
County encompasses all of the Outer Banks. And I'm working with the school district to try to get that into the school system because it's probably maybe next to the Wright brothers who did the first flight there, it's probably the most important historical event that occurred out there. I'm also in touch with the state education department because, once again, this is perhaps the most important event that occurred in all of North Carolina. And so it's something that the school, the high school, and middle school kids should know about. It's a short read, so and it's very inexpensive. Um, so it would be worth having them do it. Um, and I'm talking with PBS about doing an interview. But the children's book, it's hard to take this subject matter down to a children's level.
Mm.
Uh, so, I mean, I start in a land, long ago, far, far away,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
etc.
And do you have illustrators that you work with, or an illustrator?
Yeah, I have. The book has within it uh, tons of beautiful uh, pictures
Oh, okay.
and photos and paintings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'd say there are about 25 pictures in it that follow the text.
Okay.
Uh, so it tells the pictures alone tell the story.
And these are pictures someone drew, or they're photographs?
They're photographs and pictures that Captain White, who was the captain of the Elizabeth in 1587, that was the name of the ship. He was also an artist and a cartographer, and the Queen asked him for periodic reports through the paintings that he did.
Wow.
About 4 or 5 of his paintings in the book.
Okay. And will
Very
those,
good.
yeah, right. And will those make it into the children's book also then?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact,
Okay.
the children's book will have even more pictures than the novel does because the kids can relate better to the pictures.
Right.
Uh,
So it sounds to me like, Mr. Bernardo, that you really haven't retired.
oh, I'm still having fun. I mean, it keeps me busy. I did move from the Outer Banks to Preston Point,
Mm-hmm.
which is, as you know, an independent living facility,
Mm-hmm.
Morrisville, North Carolina, just outside of Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we came here to be with my partner's daughter after she fell and broke her femur.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
that's why we're here. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about my experience here at Preston Point.
Sure. Yeah, let's hear that. How long have you been there?
We've been here for a year,
A year.
and
Okay.
and we went to a lot of places to look, um, but starting with the fact that Preston Point is family owned. Um, Many of the other places that we looked at were owned by big corporations, and here, if something needs to be done, it's just a telephone call away. And the responsiveness has been amazing. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
starts with excellent food. The chef is truly unbelievable. The way it's structured is that we eat 2 meals a day, and you can do that all day long. If you want breakfast at 7 o'clock at night, you can do that.
Wow.
Um, Tables are waited on. You don't have any dishes or pots and pans to wash. You don't have any shopping to do. I even tell people that it's the first time in my life that I haven't had to worry about how much electricity and how much gas to use because there's an all-encompassing uh, fee. We've
Mm-hmm.
got an activities director who is amazing. She has an incredible number of activities for us, um, and the staff generally is amazing because they will pitch in um, to help other people on the staff. For example, every 2 times a week we have um, a happy hour, and all hands, including the executive director, come up to our theater to help serve people. I've seen the executive director bussing tables
Mm,
in the dining room. So the staff is amazing.
wow.
Maintenance is also included, right up to and including the changing of light bulbs. Um, we have a nurse, which I really didn't think much of when we were interviewing places, but the other places don't have a nurse,
Hmm.
and this lady is full time, and it's amazing how much she does and how much she helps the residents. We've got about 140 residents here, probably a quarter of whom live in a two-bedroom suite and the rest in one-bedroom suites.
Mm.
And facilities are very nice. Uh, they're cleaned every 2 weeks, and the cleaning crew is just incredible. All I can say is that the entire staff does a wonderful job here.
Well, and for living there a year and singing its praises, I mean that says something because you know within 12 months it's like, gee, the beginning sort of ooey gooey feelings about a place, would maybe have worn off, right? But you've been there a year and you're still, it sounds like, very happy and really enjoying it there and then singing everyone's praises and the facility as well. So that speaks
We
volumes.
It's true, and we miss the Outer Banks. I'm not going to
Mm.
lie about that.
Mhm.
But this is if we had to choose a facility here in the Raleigh metropolitan area, this one would be the choice, even after uh, having been here a year.
Right. And I have to ask, how is your partner's healing process? Is she good to
Fine.
go?
Yep, she's fine.
Good.
And it's been, nice for her to have her daughter here, and she
Hmm.
has fun with her daughter while I'm writing children's books.
Right. Right. Are there any grandkids in the?
I have twin grandsons who are 30 now, and
Wow.
they live up in Chagrin Falls near Cleveland.
Hmm.
But she
Hmm.
has three grandchildren who live in the Raleigh area.
Oh, okay. Well, nice. So
Mhm.
your twins, are they both live in Chagrin Falls?
Yes, they
Okay.
do.
Okay. Okay. They stayed close to each other. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. That's great. Well, Mr. Bernardo, it's been a pleasure talking with you today and learning about your background. Gosh, everything from Buffalo to estate planning to writing a novel and Roanoke Island. I mean, it's been really a pleasure. So
Well, I'm
thank you so much for joining us today.
very welcome. I've enjoyed it as well.
Okay, listeners, go to the website, order the book. Will you show us the cover of the book again?
Yes, and again, the website is thelostcoloniestsfound.com.
Hmm.
And
There you
here's the
go.
book.
The Legend of the Snow White Doe. And
This is
go,
the, this is the second edition, and this is the first edition.
okay.
Uh, First edition is all gone, and I tell people to hang on to it because one day it'll be worth a small fortune.
Hmm. I have no doubt. Yep, that's right. Okay, well, thank you again, and you have a great rest of your day.
Same to you.